Hello, I'm Lisa Gregg, and I'm going to talk to you today about my system for data collection, and maybe some of these ideas will work for you and you can adapt for your classroom. First of all, I wanted to just start out. I have three different things here. I have a notebook here. This is where I keep a copy of, and I have it in bright green. This is just a copy of my goals and objectives for each of my students, and I have a tab for each of my students, and all I have in here is a sheet with my goals, all the information for criteria of mastery and my methods of evaluation, and then right behind it I have my, if I can turn my page, my data sheets that I have. And this is what my data sheet looks like, and I know we'll be sending these to you as well. And that's all that's in this folder, small enough that I could carry with me into a co-teaching or collaboration situation, and it wasn't too bulky. But anyway, let me go over my data sheet that we have here. I usually include, well, I don't usually, I always have my student's name. This is marks a lot. I made this up because I do have to mark a lot on it. Marks a lot. And I put the plan date on it. At first I just had like the year, but that got confusing because then I was looking at it, I was going, now which IEP was this for? You know, because you know they'll switch, you know, and kids' new IEP will be up, and you've just got, so I put the plan date here. But then on my short-term objectives, I just sort of make a brief description. I don't have time to write a lot of stuff down. I write like 2-digit subtraction with regrouping. And then down here I have the day, a place to write down, to quickly write down the day. My first column obviously is my baseline data, and then I'll just start from the opportunities. He got 2-digit subtraction right with regrouping. The next time I assessed him, you know, it was 5 out of 10. Then after that, you know, it's 5 out of 10. We're not making much growth. I obviously need to change what I'm doing. What's he doing wrong? And then 6 out of 10. You know, it's starting to go up, and you know he's got a whole year to master this. Regrouping to the hundredths place and organize my actual results, and helps me to remember what I've assessed and what I need to assess. And so this child would maybe have an annual a sheet for math. They might have another sheet with all their language arts goals on it, then another one with all their reading goals on it. And so each child will have, depending on their situation, 1 to 3 data collection sheet pages behind their IEP goal and objective sheets, and that's all. Student goals and objectives assessment notebook. And one of the things I have found so far is that, you know, you have all these kids with all these different goals, and that I'm constantly reinventing the wheel every time it's time to assess. The example that I have doesn't have 10 opportunities for them to attempt it. And so what I decided to do, and this has really been actually my favorite part of the way I've been doing this, is whenever I do my goals on an IEP, I immediately create my assessment data sheet, and not the data collection, but exactly the tests I want them to be able to complete to show their mastery or growth. And this assessment is the same assessment every time. It doesn't change. It's not like a different sheet every time. It's the same exact questions, and there's so much time period between there. My kids don't remember, oh, I did that question last time. They don't seem to remember that. If I had a kid that indicated, or I figured that they were remembering, I would change it. But what I do is I go ahead and I create a sheet, and one of the examples like I had on here is I have a student who needs to work on creating fact families for multiplication and division facts. And so what I've done here, and I have, my tabs are actually sticky notes with each child's name on it to help organize all this. And so what I did is I created a fact family chart, and you know, like, he knows that 35 is in the top 7, and he's got to fill in that number. And then I've created this for him and for this specific goal. And so every 4.5 weeks or so, I assess him to see how he's doing, to see if he's making progress and actually being able to apply what we're working on in class. And so I have enough copies of these in my notebook so that when it's time to assess, I'm not trying to figure out what am I going to use, how do I need to do this. I know exactly what I'm going to use to assess this student. And also, especially when you start looking at facts, and this is easiest to do with math, obviously. When you're looking at a student who's got addition and subtraction problems, when you start giving them the same test over and over and over again, you'll start seeing patterns in their errors. And like one child who was having a problem with addition and subtraction, I realized that he could do addition and subtraction as long as the answer was less than 10. And I was able to see that because I was looking at the same sheet and watching him make the same errors over and over again as I assessed him. And then I was able to actually go back and change his goal. So that, and actually I had to change his assessment sheet because I realized the problem wasn't, 3 plus 4. It was 5 plus 6 was what the reading level is, or I know if I'm going to be reading it out loud. I know whether I've already figured out how many opportunities for punctuation corrections there are, how many opportunities there are for capitalization corrections, and so I don't have to really sit and really dwell on that. I can just look at what corrections did they make, and then I have my master sheet. I know exactly how many he got right, how many he got wrong, and where his consistent issues are, so I know where to focus my instruction. And so I do that, and when I'm writing my IEP goals for students, I think about what I already have, and sometimes, you'll have kids with similar issues. I just go ahead and write only if the issues are the same, but I'm not going to write his IEP goal or her IEP goal completely different from another child's when really they have the same issue. That way I can use the same assessment sheet. But it all depends on the kid, and then sometimes I just have to make new assessment sheets, and I keep them on a database in my computer. Some of them I hand make, and those I just have to keep and try not to lose. And then I'll just put new names on them. So that sort of gives you an idea of how this folder works. Now, in terms of my students, what I have found works well when I'm using this, I have a file here that my kids know that all their work's going to be in. A lot of things, obviously, you can't have worksheets for. If it's counting money, I use real money, and we sit down at the table while other kids are working on these assessments. I'll be doing that, and I've got my handy-dandy data collection sheet to write down, how many times they got it correct. And I use lots and lots of sticky notes when I'm doing that one-on-one data collection. So that sort of gives you an idea of how I manage my data. I do want to say that I have been fortunate enough, especially early on, as when I first started teaching, to visit several classrooms and saw lots of different ways people collect data and the way they do things. And I've got a lot of these ideas from other people, but I've adapted it to meet my needs. And like, for example, this data collection sheet that I've created, I actually saw Tracy Head using it in an IEP meeting because it's wonderful. She could pull it out, and she was able to show parents exactly how that child was doing on their goals. And I thought, what a great resource to have in an IEP meeting. So bless her heart, she was kind enough to share it with me when I asked her for it. And then I took that idea and I had to adapt it. The number of the assessment. So if I know they're third grade and I'm going to be using the fourth test, I write that down because what I found was so hard is I couldn't remember which test I'd used, and I didn't want to be using the same one over and over again. And so this helps me keep up with which assessments I've tested and which ones I need to make copies of. And this is how I keep up with which test I do. Now, I do use the Ames Web online program where I enter in my data, and the reason why I do that, I really like how it tells me how my kids, if they're going to meet their goal, are they heading in the right direction, are they stagnant, or are they below expectations for meeting their objectives. And also how I do that is I don't ever assess on their grade level, because if they were on grade level, they probably don't need me to be assessing them. So what I do on here is this also helps me to remember which kid is on the 2nd grade level, who's on the 3rd grade level, and my goals for them are always, if they're testing on the 2nd grade level, my goal is always for them to meet that 2nd grade norm before I move them on. Another quick thought, I think we're going to open up a SharePoint, well actually not SharePoint, but in the SharePoint site under the Special Ed Handbook, we're going to open up a folder for assessments. And what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'll go ahead and start, I'm going to start uploading to SharePoint some of my assessments that I have that maybe you can use with your students. And I want to encourage you that if you come up with any assessment sheets, to please share them with us so that we can use it, because you may have something that's a whole lot better than what I've put up. But also, you know, when you're writing goals for your students, if you want to go on and look at some of those assessments, I think it really helps you to write measurable goals when you're looking at what kind of data you're going to be collecting. It'll help you to write better goals and goals that are truly measurable, and you're going to know exactly what my baseline data is and what my end data is. And once again, it's something that we can all share and pull from and use each other's strengths to make our instruction better in the classroom, and to also give us better information about what our kids do and do not know. So that's going to be coming up on SharePoint here very soon, and we'll have those assessments up there, and please feel free to contribute, and we'll get us a nice collection going. Thank you.
School bell rings, I'm racing out the door, got my mind on something that I've been waiting for. Want a tall glass of milk and a stack of Oreos, but there's something in my driveway with a big slimy nose. There's a cow parked in my driveway.